Hello, I'm Simon Owens, and you're listening to The Business of Content, a podcast about how publishers create, distribute, and monetize their digital content. In this week's episode, we're talking about how tech industry publisher The Information covers the creator economy. When it comes to coverage of the tech sector, few publications can match the journalistic heft of The Information. Launched by former Wall Street Journal reporter Jessica Lessin in 2013, The Information quickly became an industry powerhouse, attracting some of the world's best journalists who broke many of the biggest scoops over the past decade. If there's a major story in tech, chances are that an information reporter is chasing it. So it wasn't exactly a surprise when, in January 2021, the publication put out a job ad for a creator economy reporter. With an estimated $100 billion in annual revenue, the creator economy has not only launched the careers for thousands of creators, but it's also become the core focus for many of the world's largest tech platforms. Venture capitalists are now pouring billions of dollars into creator economy startups, and creators themselves are upending entire industries that include beauty, commerce, health, and entertainment. In April 2021, The Information announced that it had hired Kaya Yuriev, a former CNN tech reporter, to helm its creator economy coverage. And she's since launched a daily newsletter that, in addition to publishing regular feature stories, also rounds up deals, trends, and product launches. Given the relative newness of the creator economy beat, I wanted to get a better idea of how Yuriev shapes her coverage. In a recent interview, she walked me through her weekly routine for news gathering, her methods for assessing startup founders' claims, and where she thinks the industry is heading in the near future. Before we jump into the interview, I have a major announcement to make. On any given week, I usually speak to multiple media entrepreneurs, and one of the most consistent pieces of advice they give me is that I should launch an online course. But I've held off on developing one, mainly because of the time commitment it would require. Between producing the newsletter and podcast, I'm stretched pretty thin, and I just didn't have the bandwidth to develop a comprehensive course all by myself. But then in late 2021, I received an email from Ed Madison, a journalism professor at the University of Oregon. He and his colleague, Damian Ratcliffe, were planning to launch an entrepreneurial journalism course, and he wanted to know if I would join them. I jumped at the chance. Over the next several months, we met each week to plot out a course that would cover every facet of building a successful content business. We used the prestige of the University of Oregon to recruit some of the media industry's top practitioners in product building, subscriptions, multimedia production, and audience engagement. Today, we're ready to announce the course. It's called Growing Your Content Business. It'll span 10 weeks and feature live interactive conversations with top executives from Google, Condé Nast, Vox Media, Quartz, Group M, The Economist, and many more. If your career touches content in any way, then you'll leave this course with actionable insights that you can apply to your work. To sign up for the course, go to contentbusiness.org. That's contentbusiness.org. I'll also put a link in the podcast description. Okay, on to my interview with Kaya. Hey, Kaya, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Simon.
So you're the creator economy reporter at The Information, but before that, though, you were more of kind of a general tech reporter, right? Like, how did you start migrating over to the creator economy beat?
Yeah, before I was at The Information, I was at CNN for 4 years, and I was covering tech. I started out as kind of a general tech reporter, so I covered startups and breaking news, and I really always was interested in social media companies, so that kind of became my broader beat over time. And part of that, I started really pitching these creator stories, and it didn't seem like a lot of people were writing about it or paying attention. This was like 2017. So I kind of carved out this niche beat for myself there, but at the same time, I was covering all the big issues facing big tech companies, so it was kind of this side beat for me.
Yeah, back then there weren't many people on the creator economy beat. Taylor Lorenz was starting to take it up. I don't think Business Insider at that point had any like specifically creator economy beat reporters like they do now. It was really just like starting to rev up this like coverage of creators as this like separate entity, right?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, people I think for a long time have covered, fun internet culture stories, but I don't think as it is now.
Yeah, there were profiles of individual influencers, as they were mainly called then, but they were kind of treated as kind of like an anomaly, not as like a continued beat, I feel like.
Yeah, and I think Taylor has really helped legitimize this beat and has been a pioneer of it.
Yeah, and how easy was it to get CNN to care about these individual creators? Like, did it get easier over time?
Yeah, I think it was more about pitching something in a broader scope. So I was doing less of a profile of one creator and more looking at, you know what, let me talk to a bunch of YouTubers about burnout and do a feature about, why YouTubers are burnt out. So I think when it was put into context, there was a lot of appetite for it.
And were there any big stories you covered at CNN about creators that stand out in your memory?
Yeah, there was a few. I mean, this was such a minor one, but I remember at the very beginning when I was starting to pitch these stories, it was this small update from Snap that they were going to start giving analytics to creators, and that was a big deal because if you were a creator on Snapchat, you had the same data as any other user. So I positioned it as the story of Snapchat fighting for celebrity users with Instagram. So I remember that was one of the first stories I did. And it was very incremental, but that in my mind was kind of the start of me paying attention to it. I did a story on the struggles of trans creators on YouTube and how on one hand it's been a really great platform for them to be able to connect with other people and provide education to others, but also the harassment that they've faced and the issues they've also faced with YouTube demonetizing videos. And so after some of the reporting, YouTube remonetized some of those videos. So it was this story on kind of exploring this very this niche within YouTube and the positives and negatives.
And was this mainly just articles for the web? Did CNN invite you on TV to talk about any of this stuff?
It was mostly digital. Yeah, I was on the digital side.
Mm-hmm. And so were you working under Brian Stelter on the media side, or was there like a separate tech section?
I was on the tech section, although I did contribute quite a bit to reliable sources in the newsletter.
Uh-huh. And then let's talk about this job at The Information. So I think most of my listeners are familiar with The Information. I had Jessica Lessin on, several months ago. It's this tech publication, very hard paywall, $400 a year, kind of thought of as like a publication for, tech executives, Wall Street executives, anybody whose career touches tech to, subscribe to for big, analysis, breaking news, stuff like that. That they've like carved out this specific beat around the creator economy, and you were kind of spearheading that. How did you hear about this job at The Information?
It was one of my friends sent me the posting and was like, I feel like this job would be perfect for you. So I applied. It was really that easy.
How long ago was that?
That was I started in April. So it must have been either late February or March.
And so, the Information is known for its big scoops around huge tech companies. Why is it suddenly interested in creators? When you were meeting with Jessica and other higher ups, like what were they telling you?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting because the creator economy has been around for a long time. I would argue it's really been around since the internet started with blogs. And if you look at YouTube, they've been paying creators with ad revenue sharing since 2007. But I think what's happened is that the industry has matured a lot and the pandemic really accelerated things. So I think we've just seen a ton of investor excitement around the creator economy. And then also we're seeing it be a bigger priority for social media companies. Mark Zuckerberg is going on Instagram Lives with Adam Mosseri and teasing creator products and talking about creators on earnings calls. Like this has become a big deal. So I think Jessica and the team really realized this and saw this as an emerging industry that required a full-time reporter to cover.
And did they kind of like have a strict idea of like what you would be doing, or was this something where you would kind of figure out what the beat is, what the cadence was, stuff like that?
No, it was really, what drew me to the job is it felt like kind of an entrepreneurial endeavor for me, where it was really, I had a lot of autonomy for how to build it. I have an amazing editor who works with me to shape the newsletter. So it was really kind of a blank page of how to do this. And I think it's evolved over time too. And as I cover it, I'm more embedded in what's happening.
And was the job, described as a newsletter role? Because it's a newsletter your job is newsletter first, right? Like most of the people who are reading your stuff are doing it in the inbox.
Yeah, it's definitely a newsletter first role. It's Monday through Thursday, so it's a really big time commitment for me. But I have done some stories co-island with other reporters here, and I've worked on other projects. But it's definitely very newsletter heavy.
And that's how they pitched it to you, was that this
Yes,
was a
yeah,
newsletter. Uh-huh. And when did you officially start that job?
in April
Uh-huh. And
of this year.
let's walk me through those early months. Like, how did you start? Kind of Monday through Thursday. I have my own newsletter. That's a big commitment, especially if you're trying to slip a lot of like original reporting into it. Tell me about your work week and how you kind of think about that cadence, and how you have stuff ready to go. It's every evening, right, that you send it out.
Yeah, it really depends. Friday is really my big day to look ahead for the week. So in the beginning, I was really worried about having enough content to fill, and then I quickly realized that there's so much happening that there's always something for me to write about. It's just a matter of figuring out the right angle. I think the biggest challenge for me is because the newsletter comes out later in the day. If there's a big headline and an obvious thing I should write about, all the stories are already going to be out. So I think my challenge is figuring out what I can bring that's new to the table. So, for example, Facebook this summer announced that it was pledging $1 billion to creators as part of a creator fund and rewarding them for using different products. So that was an obvious one for me to write about in the newsletter, but all the headlines and stories were out. So what I did is I made a chart comparing all the creator investments from companies. So looking at YouTube's and TikTok, and then I did an analysis piece kind of looking at all these creator funds. So that's something unique I can bring to the table. But on Fridays too, I kind of look back at the week and I think, was there, did a bunch of companies announce similar products, or is this one company hiring a lot, and what can that say about its future? Or are a lot of, NFT / creator companies raising funding? Or I kind of try to look for these patterns, or I try to look back if there was an announcement that I wish I had more time to dive into. And then two, now as I've done the newsletter more, people are sending me more stuff. Founders are reaching out to me with news. So it's gotten a lot easier where I have almost too much to write about now.
What's your balance between talking about individual creators versus all the startups and the platforms that are trying to service creators?
Yeah, I think the way the newsletter is set up kind of lets me dabble in everything. So once a week, I do a creator profile. So I have a spotlight on creators from different platforms, how they make money, how they got started. So that's a way to incorporate creators. Obviously, I'm also quoting them pretty regularly. I have a deals and debuts section. So that's where I round up announcements from companies, startups that are raising funding or startups that are launching. And then I have other different sections. And then the first part of the newsletter is really this kind of analysis, original reporting part.
And the information, Jessica told me that, because it's this hard paywall, because it's expensive, they want they want to be able to move stories forward, like big tentpole stories, stuff like that. What are, you've only been there for a few months, but like, what are some like big things that you've covered or broken or anything like that?
Yeah, one recent one is, it's just amazing to see how much money is being poured into creator economy startups, especially this year. So one thing that I did was I built a database of startups in the space, because what I found is that even though the creator economy has been around for a long time, the traditional data sources like academics or think tanks or other research organizations, they don't have a lot of data on the creator economy. So I was looking for a list of startups in the space, and some of it exists, but I figured that the best way to do it was just to build it myself. So with the help of our amazing engineering team and my editor, we built this database where we track funding and investors and the category the company's in. So that's one project that I did. I also have had some funding scoops. So recently, Whatnot, which is a live shopping startup, raised funding for the third time this year. So I reported on their funding round. And I think I've also just had some just interesting pieces, just kind of drawing on the trends that I'm seeing. So, like I said, when I look back on the week, I noticed a lot of companies and brands are launching creator programs. So Disney has done one, Chipotle has done one. So I've just done some kind of reporting on trends also.
I feel like I'm being pitched by new creator startups every single week,
Oh, it's
and
crazy.
even though I cover this space, and maybe you feel the same way, I can't even keep track of them all. Like, is this the hot new things for VCs to invest in?
Yeah, it definitely is. It feels like creator economy and crypto and metaverse, like all these topics are very hot right now. So I think a lot of what I'm doing is sifting through the noise, and it's a lot of vetting on the startup side to make sure they have a product or maybe some sort of funding, and it's not just this very kind of early stage idea. And also, it's what's hard is figuring out what's truly unique. I mean, there's so many startups that are doing similar things, so it's trying to look at the ones that are doing something really different and highlighting that.
Yeah, yeah, and I would say there are like two classes of creator economy tools. There are the startups that specifically try to help creators do some specific task, and then there are these huge platforms like YouTube and Facebook and TikTok, which are rolling out more and more of their own creator monetization tools. Do you think the platforms have the advantage because they also bring the audience? Like, for instance, Patreon, I just saw some news breaking within the last 24 hours. I haven't read it yet, that Patreon is like now going to start like spending on original content or something like that. And
Yeah.
I've written about this in the past, that like now that all these platforms are basically replicating all the stuff that Patreon does, it's going to make its job harder and harder. How do you think about that kind of, dichotomy between those two types of platform, or those two types of companies, the ones that just do some particular service for creators versus these platforms that already have these huge audiences?
Yeah, I mean, I think as a creator, the best place to start is on social media because that's where the biggest audience is. I mean, you can't just start from ground zero and launch a Patreon. You have to have that audience. But what I've seen is this shift where creators are really desiring more control. And I think that's what's been a really interesting thing that Substack has done, where you can leave Substack and take your email list with you. And we've seen Facebook then with its bulletin product also offer that. And same thing with Twitter. And it's become this table stakes kind of feature. So I think, yes, the platforms have the advantage because that's where the audience and the eyeballs are. But then I think once people have built an audience, they're getting really savvy and creative with monetizing that audience, with connecting more deeply with super fans. So that could be using a texting app like Community, where you're in direct contact with people. It could be Patreon. It could be launching an online course. There, online course providers like Kajabi or Masterclass or Mighty Networks have also been raising crazy amounts of funding. And a lot of creators have seen success with teaching their knowledge to other people, and they've pivoted their business that way. I also see creators kind of reverting back to traditional blogs and mailing lists and starting newsletters and trying to just have a little bit more of a direct connection with their audience. So it's a little bit of a double-edged sword. I think the platforms definitely have the advantage here, but once someone is big, I think they can take that audience a lot of different ways.
Yeah, and the whole thing of owning your audience, that's usually the pitch of these up and coming startups, is like, sure, you could go with this huge platform, but then that huge platform is not only controlling your access to your audience, but then also your monetization. The second that they change their algorithm or pivot to something new, that suddenly you're screwed. So you should have this kind of third party platform that is, separate from it, that allows you to have a little bit more ownership over your audience, to hand over your email address. And I've even seen some of the big platforms, I think like Spotify through Anchor, through its subscription thing it rolled out, it's allowing you access to at least your subscribers' email addresses and stuff. So even maybe some of the big platforms are kind of relenting and allowing some direct access to subscribers, right?
Yeah, and I think that's being pushed by the startups offering that. So they have to compete.
Uh-huh. And so the creator economy database, that's a big thing now with you. Like I'm guessing in terms of your week to week keeping track of the funding, all the new announcements of these things. It's kind of like a crunch base, but specifically for the creator economy.
Yeah, exactly.
Uh-huh. And that's only available to subscribers?
Yes, only to subscribers.
So at the time we're doing this interview, this will come out several weeks from now, but the media company Ozzy is in the news because it turns out it was faking all sorts of metrics. You're getting pitched by, all kinds of creators, all kinds of creator economy apps and stuff like that. Do you think there's a lot of fraud and fakery in the creator economy, given how easy it is to kind of twist the numbers, buy fake followers, all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I mean, when I ask companies to to submit to the database, we have this Google form, and I ask them a bunch of questions. So that's a way for me to kind of weed out, because some companies will say, oh, well, we only have 2 people and we don't have a product. And, so I think that's an easy way to weed out. But obviously this Aussie story took just everyone by surprise and by storm. We're also right now in the midst of the Theranos trial. So I think good journalism can kind of help sniff that out. I think with creators, when you're vetting creators, it is kind of easy to tell if people have bought fake followers at this point. If they have a really big number of followers and they don't have a lot of engagement or comments or likes, those are really obvious clues. And I think you see that on TikTok too, where someone can suddenly get a ton of followers because maybe they have a huge viral hit overnight, but then they're not able to sustain that. So even if they have 1 million followers, if you look at their view counts, you can kind of edge out engagement there and validity.
And I'm noticing, like, when I read Business Insider articles about creators, especially specifically about their earnings and stuff like that, there's always a line in there and saying they showed us their dashboard. I'm guessing Business Insider rolled out some kind of rule with the reporters that they have to get some kind of verification. Do you think that's like a good way to kind of root out some of the fraud and stuff like that if they're trying to make all these bold claims?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think vetting is just so important to what journalists do, and whether it's vetting an influencer or company. I mean, I think it's paramount.
So you've been writing for at least 6 months for The Information. It's a brand new beat to it. What kind of feedback are you getting? Are you getting any indications that it's driving new subscriptions? What's kind of been the response to your work so far?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think I'm sure you see this too with your newsletter, but it's really nice to be able to have that direct connection with readers where it's, when I wrote a story, it would, someone would have to go dig up my email and try to find it and write to me. And usually it was people that had very strong opinions on either side. And I think it's nice with the newsletter because you have that immediate connection with people, and, people will reply to my newsletter and give me feedback, or I have a lot of calls with people who reach out and I ask them, what sections of the newsletter or what topics they've enjoyed. So yeah, I mean, the database has been really key to driving subscribers as well. And I think what we've done too is we've been pulling out data points from the database of, companies that are offering membership services or online courses have raised X amount, so I think we've been teasing kind of some of the data from the database as well. So that's been a driver. The newsletter is free to sign up to start, and then it's for an extended trial period. So we have seen people converting to subscribers from that. We're also having an event on October 28th focused on the creator economy. So it's our first ever creator economy summit, and non-subscribers can buy tickets to it, but it is free with the subscription as well.
And when you worked at CNN, obviously probably all your content you're creating was completely free. You had this massive audience. The Information, it has an influential audience, but it's definitely nowhere near the scale. This is something I always wonder about. Like with my own newsletter, I had my paid, hard paywalled newsletter issues, and then I have the ones I make for free. And obviously I'm trying to balance like something that will provide value for the paid subscribers, but also recognizing that the things that I think have the potential to be most widely shared, I want to be free so they can be shared on social media and stuff like that. What's the kind of difference of having this mass audience versus this small audience? And do you ever wish you could share, if you could pick random articles of yours and make them available for free?
Yeah, I mean, I think what's good about the newsletter is that a lot of people do get it for free. So it does open it up and make it a little bit more accessible. I think I find that I have more of an engaged audience. And, I think the thing about being at a big media organization is, yes, you have this vast audience, but the results of how many people read your article can vary hugely. So you can have stories that are viewed by tons of people, and then you can have stories that aren't viewed by that many people at all. So I think it's not a guarantee that if you're at this big media organization that every single story is going to be a hit and reach this really wide audience. And I like, this is a niche beat, and I think the people that are reading this are really highly engaged and really interested in the topic. So I think that's a benefit too, versus just writing to kind of a general audience.
Well, with the $400 price point, like who do you think is the audience for reporting? Do you think an individual creator, like a YouTuber, would sign up for this, or is this people who work at the big tech companies, the startups, looking to work with those creators?
Yeah, I mean, the information has a very business-focused audience. So my readers are VCs and entrepreneurs and startup founders and people who work at social media companies. There are bankers and research analysts and influencer marketing agencies that read the newsletter. So I think creators could get a lot out of reading it, but it's not a newsletter that's necessarily geared at creators. Although, obviously, I think they could get a lot of value out of it. But yeah, the price point is definitely high.
And like, what are your ambitions going forward? It's just you right now, right? So like, do you think that like, in the future, the information has an entire creator economy team? Would you want to get into like a weekly podcast or daily podcast that's just kind of like, you talking with a coworker about things going on in the creator economy? What are your thoughts along, expansion and what your ambitions are?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I don't think that covering the creator economy is a job for one reporter at one outlet. I mean, I think in the future, just like we have multiple tech reporters or multiple retail reporters, I think news outlets are going to have whole teams, and I would love to see that at the information. Obviously, a daily newsletter is a lot of work. It can be a grind sometimes. So we've had summer interns, and we have a fall intern right now who has been helping me with some of the database upkeep. And this summer, one of our interns did the newsletter and did the top of the newsletter. So I think it would be great to bring more people in, but I do think that the newsletter is just such a great anchor for me because it really has me so on top of every development and helps me really connect the dots in a way and notice trends and patterns a lot faster than if I was just focused on writing stories and features.
What do you think the feasibility is for, a career in the creator economy, specifically as a creator? Like, based on calculations I've seen, the creators are pulling down upwards of a collective like $10 billion a year. If you just look at like the public statements of how much, YouTube has paid out to creators, how much Patreon has paid out to creators, how much Substack. If you add up all those numbers together, it's somewhere between 10 and $20 billion a year, which if you do the math and, assuming like a $50,000 a year is the median income for Americans, that's tens of thousands, if not upwards of 100,000 people who are potentially making some kind of full-time living off of being a creator. Jack Conte, the CEO of Patreon, has predicted that we are entering what he calls a second renaissance, where someone can aspire to be a creator in the same way that someone aspires to be an accountant or a doctor. Whereas before you had to like get lucky if you wanted to like have enough star power to make a full-time living. Whereas like he thinks that it'll be like almost like a normal middle class job to aspire to. In terms of like the arc of the creator economy and where it is now, how feasible is it for someone to, who dreams of being a creator to actually make a full-time living out of it?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's not a one-size-fits-all answer. And NeoReach, this influencer marketing agency, had some data recently that they had polled a bunch of their creators, and they found that the median income was about $100,000 a year. So, there's all these different numbers floating around. I've talked to creators, there's widely different incomes, and I think it is a viable career path. And I do see this, as the future of work. I mean, I think the pandemic especially has really had people reevaluate their lives and what they're doing, and people have lost jobs in corporate America. And I've talked to so many creators who have suddenly turned to TikTok and have this strong following and are pursuing that as a career path. So I think it is a viable career path, but I think people need to be aware the pitfalls. I mean, you don't have the support of a 401k plan or health insurance or paid time off, and it can be a very exhausting and lonely career at times too, especially if you look at YouTube creators. They're spending a lot of time video editing, and that can be, very lonely. So I think it's just, there's a lot of things people have to weigh, and I think there's just so many more options now and monetization opportunities for people without having to drastically change their content. They can add suddenly Patreon, or they can start doing cameos, and that's a whole new income stream that can be a low lift. So I think it really depends on the person, but I do see this as a viable career path.
Well, I mean, I'm also noticing a trend where like niche specific creators where the stuff they're creating has to do with their kind of their career, like whether it's on Wall Street or as a doctor or something like that, where if they're a doctor, then they use their medical expertise in their creations. If they're finance, they, give stock tips, or if they work in real estate, tips on how to, invest in real estate, different stuff like that, where suddenly there's this Venn diagram of their work, of their strictly real estate work versus their creator stuff and then eventually that those two circles start kind of, moving in on each other. And then suddenly they're almost spending all their time on the creator side. Do you think that's kind of like a natural progression for a lot of future creators, where they get a job specializing in something and then slowly migrate over to creating content about that?
Yeah, I mean, I've seen that trend a lot, especially during the pandemic. I mean, I've seen psychologists shut their practice, and now they're just doing mental health topics on TikTok and videos. So I definitely see that happening. And in some cases, it can be more lucrative than the job they were doing before, even as a doctor or a lawyer or a banker. So that's definitely been a huge trend. I think, too, with the Reddit frenzy and GameStop and AMC. I mean, there's just been this huge movement to retail investors and people being really interested in investing. So I think people see opportunity there to fill in with their expertise.
And then I guess, my final line of questions has to do with kind of the App Store tax, this tax that Apple and Google's Android that puts on the creator, or it puts on all apps. But now it seems, now that the creator economy is heating up, before, when it was just Uber having to give up a 30% cut or 15% cut, we didn't really care that much because it was this huge corporation. But like, you think about, Kevin Kelly's 1,000 true fans theory about how you could make a full-time living with just 1,000 true fans paying $100 a year. But when suddenly 300 of those fans are paying directly into Apple's pocket, and you're trying to eke out a middle-class income, that a creator economy, that tax seems pretty steep. And obviously some of this stuff has been coming up in like the lawsuit of Epic versus Apple, different stuff like that. And do you see, like, and then now, sorry, I'm giving this long winding question. I just did a big profile of this app called Koji, which is operating fully on the open web. So it's not subjected to any kind of app store tax or something like that. How do you think that dynamic is going to fit with all these individual creators? Like, do you think they're going to really stand for these huge 30%, 40% cuts that the platforms are all charging now?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's become this huge issue and huge talking point. I mean, Mark Zuckerberg has talked about it and used it in kind of his ongoing fight with Apple. So it's definitely become a talking point. I will say that brand partnerships are still the bread and butter of the creator economy, and that's the top way most creators make money. Obviously, there are exceptions, and that doesn't really get wrapped up in Apple. But as we're seeing all these social networks now roll out direct monetization, it's going to become a bigger issue, because for so long, there wasn't a way to directly make money from Instagram or Twitter or any of these platforms. But now, as you're adding in super follows and subscriptions and all these new products, Facebook made a point of showing a screenshot of, here are your earnings, here's how much is going to Apple and Google, here's how much is going to taxes, and here's how much you're getting. So I think there's also been more education of these fees and what's happening, because no one was talking about this even a year ago. So I think it's definitely going to become a bigger issue. And startups are building their products differently as a result. If you look at Substack, I mean, they have been working on a reader app, but a lot of these companies have prioritized web experiences. Koji is a great example. I mean, they've built their own app store and come up with their own model, but a lot of these companies are building on web first or trying to figure out ways around it.
Yeah, and it's a big problem for the Facebooks of the world, because they want to apply their own tax. Like, let's say Facebook wants to take 10%. but then they're taking 10% on top of Apple's 30%, and suddenly they're taking 40%, and that's not looking good to creators, and they're having to compete with the Kojis and Patreons of the world, which are only taking, between 5 and 10%, and it seems like that's going to be a problem.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, Kaya, those were all the questions I had for you. Where can people find you online?
You can find me on Twitter, and the link for my newsletter is in my bio.
Awesome. Well, this is a lot of fun. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks so much.
Okay, thanks for joining us. I'm actually on the lookout for new guests for this podcast, so if you do interesting stuff in digital content, whether you're a full-time YouTuber, a media executive, or run a cool niche newsletter, definitely reach out. My email address is simonowens@gmail.com. Okay, see you next week.